E ngā mana, e ngā maunga, e ngā hoa whā, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. No inga rangi o kutupuna. No reira ka mihi ki te whenua o Greenwich me te awa Thames. Ko Ngāti Ranana ki te patonga te iwi. I whanau mai o I Ranana, engari I tiwai tamariki ana aho, I tipu akeo ki Ototahi. Ko te whanganui atara taku kāinga noho nai anei. Ko Samantha Barrass taku ingoa. Ko taku mahi ki te mana tate hoko hoko, ko te mana whakahaere. No reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko hurio ki te reo ingarihi. Morena, thank you very much for hosting us this morning. I know that Paul and Claire are looking forward to speaking to you shortly. And I hope that everyone's been able to take time over the summer to rest and recharge for the coming year. It's going to be a busy year for financial services in New Zealand. And while the new financial advice regime and the conduct of financial institutions regimes are both at very different stages of implementation, I've been massively encouraged by the way the industry and the FMA are working successfully together to deliver both. And I feel and see a real cause for optimism in together understanding the important outcomes these regimes need to deliver for New Zealanders and making sure that together we're all resolved to deliver them. In other areas, our new consumer experience survey signalled a wider intention that we have to use behavioural insights and research to underpin our regulatory approach. And I'm delighted that Stuart Johnson, as our first chief economist, will further this work. Stuart starts with us soon, and he brings nearly 20 years' experience as an economist and behavioural science expert in the financial services industry, spanning the banking and insurance sectors, as well as regulation more generally. So, what lies ahead for 2023? New Zealand financial services face a series of significant milestones through a period in which central banks around the world are having to take actions unseen for a long while to reduce inflation. We need to implement some critical pieces of new legislation, and there's been lots of time for discussion in recent years, but in 2023, this year, they really do become real. And we're here to support you as we transition through the introduction of the full financial advice regime, the conduct regime for banks and insurers, and the climate-related disclosure regime. And this morning, as much as indicating where our focus will lie in the months ahead, I also want to set out how the FMA itself is changing. At the FSC conference last year, I added some detail on the approach we will be taking to our work going forward, in particular, really leaning into a crystal focus on outcomes. I said that an outcomes-based approach is about the regulator and regulated working together to deliver the right outcomes for all New Zealanders when they interact with financial services firms. It's about working together to ensure customers get the right products at the right time and these meet their expectations. Ultimately, it's about more New Zealanders than ever having justified confidence that the financial sector is working well for them. And that lens, more New Zealanders than ever having justified confidence, is the lens through which we will do our work. It's our departure point for the broad range of issues that we will work together with you on. An outcomes-focused approach does not start with what the legislation says or the rulebook says. It starts with what is the right outcome for a strong sector that works well for all. This approach ensures regulations and rules are a means to an end rather than an end in themselves. The real end is fair outcomes. And internally, the FMA has been doing some significant work to prepare for this shift. We've created new roles and introduced a leadership structure that enhances an innovative, forward-looking capability, as well as underpinning a collaborative strategic approach to our core licensing, monitoring and enforcement work. Both are critical for a regulator that has grown significantly in recent years and has much to deliver. We'll bring new people on board, recruiting from both New Zealand and offshore. And some of those roles have already been advertised, and some will be advertised in the months ahead. And this shift will begin to take effect from February. So what does this mean for you? Internally, there should be much closer alignment between our teams, enabling decisions to be made quicker and at the right level. I'm looking for shorter decision-making chains in the FMA. We'll be looking for greater integration of economic thinking, research, data and insights to inform our areas of focus. We also will be wanting to examine the outcomes of our decisions and our interventions more, considering fully whether our actions have the desired effect. Our aim is to be self-aware, learning and improving regulator, continually assessing and refining the way that we articulate and deliver on our mandate. And as I've met with you over the last few months, one of the things I keep hearing is, oh, this sounds great, Samantha, but it doesn't actually reflect what we're experiencing all the time when we speak to the FMA. And to this, I'm going to say two things, really up front. One, these changes will take time to bed in at the FMA. Delivering outcomes-based regulation requires a fundamental shift in rethinking about how we operate. Our new structure enables us to get this work rolling, but it's a long-term evolving project. It's not going to be a single snap-it-on overnight change. And our commitment to and practice of strong stakeholder engagement remains steadfast, and that will remain throughout. And the second point that I think is important to make is that our policy of credible deterrence is not changing. People have heard me say that we are not enforcement-led. And the fact is we've never been, except for at our very beginning, as some of you will remember, when we inherited the finance company collapses. But since then, the FMA has applied a range of tools in our work with all of you and with our licensed population. And maintaining a credible intervention and enforcement function is absolutely necessary to promote integrity and confidence in markets and financial services. We will use litigation tools when we see egregious examples of serious misconduct. We should and will always be prepared to act where necessary. We continue to have significant fair dealing breaches reported to us by a variety of financial institutions. It's now almost 5 years since the conduct and culture reviews commenced, and the legislation being breached is now almost 10 years old. A week ago, we published the outcome of one piece of enforcement. In that case, the judgment noted the fair dealing breaches stemmed from decisions made by senior management rather than systems and controls issues. Given my predecessor began by warning against complacency and continued to warn of this throughout his tenure, I'm sceptical if I'm told that the FMA needs to stop looking back and start looking forward. Yes, we are looking to the future to deliver COFI and the other new regimes, but that doesn't mean that issues that have occurred should simply be ignored. These cannot be brushed aside as legacy issues if customers are still affected or out of pocket today through systems that should have been fixed and invested in years ago. The roles of the industry and the regulator are to engage, support, and deliver for consumers. Acknowledging and rectifying the issues of the past is a part of that. But I'm also conscious of the time it's taken to resolve some of the issues that we've uncovered. And my goal is for the FMA to deliver responses to breaches faster with expedited outcomes. An important part of our approach is a commitment to collaborate and engage with the industry. Our approach is very relationship-based, and this is no way mutually exclusive from the importance of maintaining a credible deterrence function. We will do both, engage and enforce. The public, the government, and those with the industry committed to their customers who put all the investment into working with us and complying with new regimes expect nothing less. And I'm going to let Paul to build on the work we're doing in this area shortly. This year sees 3 new regulatory regimes being introduced, and it's critical that we all work together to deliver these. In some, like COFI, we're simply catching up with international norms. In others, like climate-related disclosures, New Zealand has been a pathfinder. And I want to acknowledge that this does create additional demands and efforts from the industry. And if I would make one observation in relation to this from my first 12 months, it's that all the industry bodies that represent you and your sector would benefit from more resource and input. And I do assure you I haven't been paid any money to make that comment. The FSC has played a really important leading role in the past 5 years in navigating a period of change. Under Richard's leadership, it has upskilled, upscaled, and increased its engagement with the senior staff at the FMA and across government. And the FSC is, from my experience, a great example of what can be achieved. I'm also speaking from my 5 years' experience in an industry body earlier on in my career, as well as years of working with industry bodies as a regulator, when I talk about and really want to underline the real value, particularly as we're expanding remits and regulatory coverage. There is huge value in investing to equip industry bodies to support you and ensure that regulatory and legislative changes proposed are appropriate and moving in the right direction. There is also value in industry organisations collaborating and discussing issues and proposing solutions. So from my standpoint, returning from my decades offshore, I see New Zealand is moving towards international norms in financial regulation. Legislation like COFI tackles issues raised in the IMF's review in 2017, not just our conduct and culture reviews of 2018. This means that the elevated levels of change currently underway need to be acknowledged and treated as a part of a long-term international trend. And within this, it's important that firms don't inadvertently give the perception that they're looking to wriggle around the borderline of the regulations. Recent reports around performance management frameworks, correct or otherwise, provide a good example of what to avoid. In this case, the important outcome is that consumers do not feel under pressure when making important decisions about financial well-being. Whether it's a bonus motivating this, a desire to be seen as a high achiever, or the fear of losing a job, it's just wrong. And when we in the FMA talk about outcomes-focused regulation, this is what we mean. And the benefit of licensing conditions, fair conduct programs, this kind of more principles-based approach, combined with us really thinking about the outcomes, is that we will and are able to take a very holistic approach to whether firms have processes and behaviour that have the potential or can or are leading to poor behaviour and poor outcomes. So we will purposefully look to take a broad approach to how we will use our powers to make sure there is a strong focus on consumer experience in the financial sector. We've highlighted conflicted conduct as a major barrier to achieving fair treatment and good outcomes. Firms responded really well to our bank incentives review in 2018. Conflicted conduct leading to poor customer experiences will be high on my agenda and the FMA's regulatory delivery team radar going forward. Our priorities will be driven by the new regulatory regimes that are being introduced and setting up the FMA for the future in what looks likely to be actually a really quite difficult economic period. Both Treasury and the RBNZ are now predicting a recession this year. And New Zealand financial services faces a series of significant milestones, while at the same time the economy faces some serious headwinds. This is going to be a huge opportunity for the sector to show that it can support customers through good times and the bad. Making sure that customers are properly assisted through this period is an important priority. The overarching obligation to treat customers fairly is an evergreen, ongoing requirement. The COFI Fair Conduct Programmes are not subject to economic conditions, nor are the requirements of the FMC Act. It's in the moments of economic stress that these protections are particularly needed to endure, and Claire is going to speak to this shortly. So here we are, back to work from the summer break for most of us. Can be a bit of a challenge, whether it's been great weather or not. I think sort of doubly so this year as we all go into 2023. But I really do hope that the break gave you a chance to enjoy the beautiful landscapes and coastlines, friends and family, whether in sunshine or in the rain, as I know some of you experienced in parts of the country, at home or abroad. And these moments are fantastic for grounding, recharging, and it's so important when times get tough. They really do help us to bring a sense of perspective. As part of our internal work, the FMA has refreshed its values. Looking to the horizon, Te Pai o Te Mana Warangi is now at the heart of Te Mana Tatai Hoko Hoko's values. It's there to remind us, as regulators, to remember our purpose, to be willing to adapt, embrace changing circumstances, and to look to the horizon, look to the future. But looking to the horizon also serves as a reminder that having more New Zealanders believe that the financial services sector works well for them is a goal that can unite us all. We can foster the fairest financial sector in the world, even when markets are uncertain and the economic winds are difficult. But it is only by coming together that we can achieve it. So I'd like to thank you for making the early start to come and join us this morning, and any questions that you may have before Claire and Paul come up as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Samantha. Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Vanja Thomas, taku ingoa, Atamarie. Thanks, Samantha, for your pepeha and for your instructive regulatory keynote. I'm really delighted to have this fireside chat with you. There'll be lots of great questions, I'm sure, but while people sort of get busy with Slido, I'll just get the ball rolling by picking up a couple of the key themes that have been mentioned. So just to start off with, Samantha, you've talked a little bit about the new structure, about the recent appointments to your team. I'm sure Paul and Claire will talk about their roles, but can you tell us a bit more? How's it all going?
Is this on?
Yes.
You can all hear it, great. It's coming together really well. Obviously, massively delighted to have the talent that's Paul and Claire and Liam to be able to join me in the team and to appoint our first chief economist. We've got 2 more executive director positions, one covering transformation and the other covering sort of strategy for us. Those recruitments are going well, and I have to touch lots of wood, as those of you who've been involved in recruitment know, but I'm hoping to be in a position to make some announcements shortly. So it is all coming together really well.
Excellent news. Now I can see questions coming through already, so I'll just start with another one of mine, and then we'll go through some Slido questions. But what we're really seeing is lots of cooperation with regulators, particularly the Reserve Bank. And you know, we see that from the annual report released yesterday, it was one of the statements of intent, so presumably that's set to continue. But where do you see the real value in that?
It's hugely important. Our working relationship through COFA, we in the RBNZ are joint chairs of COFA. It's hugely important when you have prudential regulation and conduct regulation in 2 different organisations, that those organisations work really well together, because because you need to be able to pull off the joint outcome of strong financial stability in firms in the financial sector, alongside them delivering great products and services to their customers. And that's delivered by a close working relationship between the RBNZ and ourselves, and it works really well and will endure.
Okay, so investor confidence in the financial markets has increased steadily to 72%. So how does this level compare globally? How does it compare globally, and how much better can it get in New Zealand?
Oh, well, I always think of it as 72%. There's another 28% to go. So it's about kind of continually improving. I suspect I still don't have all the global figures to hand, but generally I would say that in New Zealand we're doing pretty well. We have not had here in this country, we have not had the huge impact of the energy price shocks that there has been elsewhere in the world. We have been sort of slightly protected from that. We haven't had. We're not as if you're in Europe, I've just come back from Christmas in the UK, and the proximity of the Ukraine crisis, to when you're living in Europe, all of that does have a knocking of investor confidence. So I think New Zealand's in a really, given the headwinds that we face, I think we're in a good good position to continue to work together to kind of really lift that confidence.
Thank you. How far away is the FMA from providing some more specific guidance on Ko-fi?
Oh, well, I think Claire will be in a great position to pick that up. As you know, licensing opens up in the middle of this year, so there will be a continuing, we will be continuing to support with further guidance. People, we won't be sort of hanging people out for too much longer.
And a question here about the sort of, compliance approach versus a more outcomes-focused approach. Principles-based compliance is incredibly difficult to implement and with no finish line. In practice, how will firms implement this, in your view?
Yeah, well, let's look at the Ko-fi legislation. The central requirement of the Ko-fi legislation is that you develop and implement a fair conduct program. So that is at the heart of it. I think a great place to start, and I gave kind of an example in my speech, and it's the lens that we're looking through it, is to almost sort of ask yourself, how do my processes, how do my policies, how does my new product development, how do my remuneration processes, how does that all impact on my customers having confidence in the quality of the services that I'm providing? And if you can articulate that, then you're starting from a great place. And it is it will ever, part of the ongoing business that you will do will be to continually ask yourself those questions. But that kind of thing, how does this benefit my customers? How does this equate to fair treatment of my customers? And how am I going to test that? Am I going to be testing that the experience that my customers have? I've given the example before, is it as easy for my customers to exit a product as it was for them to get into it? I might think that I know how to do that, but am I going to be testing that? How does my testing of consumer experience work?
And then just interested in maybe if you could amplify a little bit on how the sector is responding to regulatory change. You said you're encouraged, massively encouraged.
Yeah. We in New Zealand have the great opportunity of our population size, and so it's easier for the industry, for the sector, and ourselves as a regulator to work together. And we've got that kind of, I think that kind of hugely shared philosophy on really kind of making New Zealand a better place. I think that's a very strong core that runs through it. I have been massively encouraged over the last year by the responsiveness of the industry, the way in which we come together, we work together. There's kind of an openness and a transparency in the way we work together. So it's just really leaning into that more.
And a question about crypto. So what steps is the FMA taking to address risks in the crypto sector?
Yeah. So it's a big question. Where crypto is a financial asset and comes into the definitions of the various financial assets, then it is treated in the same way as any other sort of financial product that comes through. The critical kind of approach to the risks of crypto are very much around the public warnings. That is particularly where there is the risk of New Zealanders engaging in offshore crypto enterprises. It's really kind of getting the message out there that you need to beware, because there's a whole lot of things that we just simply cannot control.
There's a question about self-reporting, but I wonder if that might be one that Paul will pick up on, or shall we? The question is explaining the value of self-reporting remediation incidents.
Well, Paul will pick up that big detail. But I'm going to start actually with a big point, which is that if you're ever sitting around a board table and you know that something has gone wrong and you're dealing with it, the automatic point that should be coming into your head is, we need to tell the FMA. And if you're having a discussion around a table of, oh, should we or shouldn't we tell the FMA, then you probably ought to tell the FMA. That's a great place to start. You don't wait until every other option has been exhausted before you tell us. So the minute any of you find yourselves saying, should we tell the FMA or shouldn't we, just tell us.
Understood. So you mentioned the importance of removing conflicted actions in financial services. This surely must mean the end of trail commissions.
Yeah, so I think the way that I'm going to come at this is less around that quite it's quite a loaded question. As you know, I think that the question is for here in this country, and we do need to do some more thinking about it, is how do we make sure that New Zealanders have access to good quality advice? And that's really the key question. How do we make sure that they get the advice that they need when they need it? And I think we do need to acknowledge that sometimes when people talk about New Zealanders are receiving less advice now than they were because of regulation around conflict. Actually, I think some of the advice that New Zealanders were receiving was actually more sales pressure rather than advice. So I think one of the I sort of did cover it in the speech. One of the things that I am really keen to come together with the industry and others on as we go, not just in 2023 but 2024, is how do we nail making sure that there are good quality conversations between providers and customers and consumers over what they need. So the classic one, if you're taking out an impactful loan, what are you doing to make sure that if you lose your job or you go, or something, you become ill, what are you doing to make sure that you can meet those commitments? I think there is a conversation that we do need to be having and coming together to have.
So probably just time for one more, but just thinking about if we project forward to 2024, what will you look at as, one of your major achievements over the previous 12 months?
Okay, so that is sort of easy, which is given what we've got to do, we've all got a lot of work on our hands this year. For me, it's the calm, steady implementation, the no dramas implementation of the various regimes that we're implementing this year. That's the first thing. And the second is that we've together got a stronger shared understanding of what we mean by outcomes-focused regulation and what that means for how we work together.
Thank you, Samantha. I can see that we are totally out of time, and Claire and Paul are just amping to get up here. Thank you again for delivering your regulatory keynote. We thank you for your insights and your observations, for your candour and for your willingness to engage. It's always much appreciated, as is your wealth of leadership experience and regulatory knowledge. 2023 certainly shaping up to be a pretty interesting year for us all, so let's buckle up and work through it together. And now please show your appreciation in the usual manner. Thank you, Samantha.